This podcast contains our own personal views not associated with any organisation. Coronial contains descriptions of death inquests that may be graphic and disturbing to some listeners. Discretion is advised. Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Coronial. My name is Emma.
I'm Alice.
And I'm Georgie.
And in this episode, we will be having a look at the inquest into the death of Tommy No, who passed away in 2014 while rehearsing a lion dancing routine.
Sorry, what?
Oh.
So this coronial inquest for me was very much like clickbait.
Wait, hang on. Was this like in your Facebook feed?
No, because you know how sometimes with some states, when you're looking through coronial inquests, they come up with the catchphrase words.
Yes, the little keywords.
And I just saw it, lion dancing, and
Excellent.
I was like, what's that? And so obviously I had to explore further.
And sorry, hang on. I just want to lie on dancing.
Like the
Lion,
animal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure
Not
that
line dancing.
Yeah, well, I just was like, I want to make sure you're not just saying this weird, like we're not dancing, what is the grapevine or whatever? You mean like...
Boot scooting.
Yeah, we're not boot scooting.
No.
We're concerned about
We're lion dancing.
an animal, a carnivorous animal
Well,
dancing.
that's the impression that I
Well,
got as well.
the animal isn't-
which is why I'm saying it's a clickbait title.
A live animal is not involved.
Yeah, but like lion, carnivorous animal
Yes. Yeah.
dancing.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
How do you know
but
that?
yes.
Because that's where my mind went. I was like, is he
What is
dancing
lion
with
dancing?
a lion?
Do you know what lion dancing is?
I'm pretty sure I do.
Oh, okay.
Well, don't spoil it.
Yeah,
yeah,
like-
yeah.
No
I
spoilers.
need some explanation.
Yeah.
So I just also wanted to say from the outset that this coroner could be really quite vague in some parts of the inquest, and actually a lot of the time it was really frustrating, not explaining things enough or to the
Sometimes
extent
that can
that
be-
I would like them to be explained, because I'm trying to comprehend what you're saying, and there was sort of no visuals or anything.
Yeah. And it's not just like juicy details are missing, it's like
no,
explanations of things that would actually be
it's for
vital
you
to the understanding.
conceptualise.
Yeah.
Might be assumed knowledge for some people, but not for everybody. Sort of thing.
I mean, a small subset of
Okay.
the population would be an assumed knowledge for, I think.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess it's hard as well, though, because what we're reading is the inquest findings, which are a summary of a number
That's
of
right.
portions of the investigation and evidence presented. So, again, you're just saying, like, just because it was presented and, you know, the coroner has it at his side, not putting that into the summary is unhelpful because you don't have that extra detail.
That's right. And a lot of the times he referred to like footnotes and was just like see exhibit whatever
Yeah.
to whoever's evidence. And it was like, great, but we don't have any access to those
That-
exhibits, so we don't
Yeah.
actually know what you're referring to.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it's not helpful for us, but I mean in the context, like it's fine for the coroner and
Yeah.
for other people close to the case to actually read through, but as a completely objective third party, it was a little bit hard to follow. But anyway, as a result of that, I have made some assumptions to try and piece together some bits of the evidence. But obviously, I'll make sure I caveat when it's an assumption made by me versus when it's actual evidence or opinion given by the coroner, just to make sure that we're keeping everything as
Transparent.
Yeah, as transparent as possible. So Tommy was 19 years old at the time of his death, which occurred on the 4th of November 2014. Bit of background about Tommy. He graduated high school in 2013 in New South Wales, and he had commenced a mechanical apprenticeship in the year of his death.
Okay.
So he was a popular young man. Apparently he played sport, loved rap music, and he had been involved in lion dancing for 4 to 5 years prior to his death.
I'm still so intrigued.
He had been attracted to the dynamic and creative environment of lion dancing and soon developed a passion for it and commenced training 2 to 3 times a week.
Cool.
So let's answer the question of what
Do you
lion
come with an
dancing
instructional
is.
video, or like,
I
are you going to stand
wish.
up and do it?
No, you
No,
need
it's actually a
props.
partner thing. So unless you want to help,
Yeah,
Kind
you need the
unless you want
costume.
to help with it, I would suggest let's just explain it. So, lion dancing is a form of traditional dance in Chinese culture performed in different forms all over Asia. The performers are dressed in an elaborate lion costume and they mimic lions' movements through their dance. It is usually performed at Chinese New Year and in other traditional
Right,
festivals.
okay, so I'm just like super ignorant and thinking that's like a dragon dance? But
Yeah, it's like a dragon dance, but lions. Dressed
Yeah.
as a lion
Yeah, okay.
version.
Yep.
Mhm. So the dance is performed in pairs, as I just said, with others in the troupe playing drums, cymbals, and gongs to accompany the actual dancers. So it's an ancient art form that is generally taught as an oral tradition, like martial art. To the best of the relevant people in the inquest's knowledge, there are no manuals or written curriculums for lion dancing, and there are sort of no records of student development or anything kept. It's not like ballet or gymnastics or something like that where, you progress levels.
Yeah.
There's set curriculums and things. It's just
It's
sort of
passed down.
It's an ancient art form that's passed down from generation to generation.
I don't know nearly enough about dancing because I'm like, sorry, curriculum for
Yeah, well, there's like...
And I get that. I understand there must be like steps of ways you learn things because you can't just be a ballerina.
Well, for ballet, there's exams.
Yeah.
So you go through and you progress it's like school.
Yeah.
You go through and you have to pass certain elements to be able to graduate to the next level or pass your exam. So a lot of dance is quite structured like
Yes,
that.
very.
This is not the case here. So because there is no set curriculum, there's considerable reliance on the master or the coach and their personal skill and knowledge of the art form to assess and understand the capabilities of their students. So it's very sort of heavily reliant on the skill of the people teaching. Knowledge of the form of lion dancing can take a very long time to master. Apparently it is quite an intricate dance, but there are now international competitions held throughout Asia, and groups of lion dancers compete against each other, judged on their skill and creativity. The competitions have encouraged new developments and innovations to push the boundaries of lion dancing.
Yeah, get the next level of wow factor or
Exactly
new
right.
things that you're doing.
So one such development, speaking of, is the use of small circular platforms raised on steel poles for the dancers to jump between.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that would be not good for me.
So hang on. Platform on steel poles
Yes.
for dancers to jump between.
Circular platforms raised on steel poles.
And someone is carrying said steel pole as
I
you've just
don't
lifted
know.
your arms.
This is where it was really hard for me to conceptualise what was
Okay.
going on.
Yeah, they mounted to the ground, or
I
are
think
they
they're
movable?
mounted to the ground, at least in the context of what happened in this
Okay.
scenario, they were mounted to the ground. But I
Okay.
don't know for the actual
Mm.
performances
Whether they're,
Yeah.
whether they're
Oh,
mounted or not.
Okay.
But I guess it really
Because
doesn't
it's a
matter.
very dynamic, I mean, it's dancing, so you're moving around a lot.
Are you going to purpose build them and adhere them to the ground, or are you going to purpose build them from
I think they're adhered to the ground just because
Okay.
of a comment that was made from the coroner. But again, that's something that's not explained because he
Obvious.
sort of talks about like regulation, height, and requirement.
Yeah, I was
Right.
going to say, are they engineered and manufactured by someone who's like, I make
Suited.
platforms for lion dancing, or is
Yeah.
it just like the performers
together.
themselves are making them?
Can't answer that question.
Okay.
I
Okay.
don't know. So these platforms were used by an organisation called the Chinese Youth League, which was the organisation where Tommy danced. So not all lion dancing groups used these particular poles and platforms. The addition of poles obviously adds more danger to the element of lion dancing that's not actually present in the traditional art form of lion dancing. It's a new added thing to enhance competition. So it's estimated that there are around 25 to 30 lion dance groups in New South Wales, and only a small number of them use poles, with the majority of them just concentrating on the floor work aspect of lion dancing. So that's a little bit of background about lion dancing for you,
Excellent.
just in case you wanted to know.
Definitely wanted to know.
So a bit more about the Chinese Youth League, which was the group that Tommy was in. So it's a non-for-profit community organisation formed and developed to embrace cultural, sporting, social and welfare activities in the Australian Chinese community. It itself is an incorporated association regulated by the New South Wales Department of Fair Trading. So it was founded in 1939 and is one of the longest established ethnic community organisations in Australia. It supports numerous activities which operate as like subgroups of the Chinese Youth League, including lion dancing and other things like Tai Chi and dragon boat racing, and there was a whole host of other things that the Chinese Youth League supports.
Yep.
So let's get into what happened with Tommy. So on the 4th of November 2014, Tommy attended the Chinese Youth League for a regular training session. Again, he trained 2 to 3 times a week. There were 5 other people at the training that night, including 2 coaches and Tommy's regular training partner. Remembering they do this in pairs.
Yep. And was it a male?
So it's 2 men. Not
Yeah.
sure how old the other man was, but I assume if he's training with Tommy, he's probably
Similar.
late teens, early 20s.
Yep.
Yeah.
And would they perform together as well as train together?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So they were
You always
regular.
do it together with a regular
Yeah.
other individual?
That's
okay,
right.
yeah.
So Tommy and his training partner were practicing for an upcoming performance. During this routine, Tommy acted as the head of the lion and Tommy's partner was acting as the body. So the routine involved Tommy being carried on the head and shoulders of his partner.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yep.
So Tommy's feet were on his partner's chest. So thinking he's like sitting on his head.
Yeah.
I'm guessing his feet were kind
Yeah.
of...
Oh, like rather than
perched.
sitting on his shoulders, like
Yeah, well,
you
that's
would
what I
often see.
imagined to start with, that he was sitting
Yeah.
on his shoulders like a kid sits on their
Yeah.
parents' shoulders, but actually he was sitting on his head
Yeah.
oh wow,
with his sort of
Feet there.
on his chest
Ah.
area.
okay,
Okay.
interesting.
And his partner's role was to jump between the circular steel platforms, which were leveraged off the ground on poles. And they were some distance in the air, but it doesn't say.
That was going to be my question of
It
how
doesn't
high
say
up.
how high in the air they were.
But implying it's a jump rather than a step.
It's a jump, so they are
Yeah.
some distance
Yeah.
apart from each other.
And so it's a guy carrying another guy jumping between some platforms.
Yes.
and steel, so they're not exactly non-slip.
And they're circular.
And how
steel.
high up again were they?
We don't know.
Oh, I don't know.
It wasn't in the report, so
Some height off the ground. So
it
that you
is
wouldn't-
off the ground, and it's not really relevant
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
how
Okay.
high
Okay.
off
Okay.
the ground. Spoiler.
This would not end well if I was doing this.
So
I'm
during
not
this,
that coordinated.
Yeah, I'm just like, it
Yeah.
seems. I'm not. Who jumps with another person on their shoulders in
Chinese
a
lion
dance?
dancers.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, thank you.
People who are way more athletic than I am.
Yeah, yeah. This is my issue mainly.
So during this training session, Tommy and his partner did, first of all, started off with some minor stretches, as you do, before they started doing drumming practice,
Mhm.
which is obviously another part of the troop, and then they began to practice their routine on the poles. So Tommy's partner tried what the coroner referred to as the long jump between 2 specific platforms, I guess, a few times. First off without Tommy
Oh, yeah.
on his shoulders, or his head, I should say. And then they tried the jump with Tommy sitting on his partner's head. There were no formal spotters or like anyone paying any close supervision.
Yeah, so
to-
other people
All
in
of this
the...
makes me nervous for so
Yeah, I
many
know.
reasons.
So other
well,
people,
you know where it's going.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
other people in the room, but they're not specifically
They're not
watching
watching.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the way that this particular long jump worked was that Tommy, as I said, sat on his partner's head, and his partner would jump from one platform to the other, and this would cause Tommy, as the head of the lion, to be propelled forward that he would land on another platform in front.
Okay.
Which doesn't really make a lot of sense
Oh,
to
no,
me.
'cause
No,
I
no,
know-
it's like a double jump. So
Yeah.
like he is therefore springing off of that person
Yeah,
at the
and so
same
his-
time and
his
using the
feet are on
velocity of
chest,
the.
so he's obviously
Yeah.
leveraging.
Yeah. So rather than sitting on the shoulders where you would be sort of locked in,
Yeah.
he's sitting on the head with his feet
Feet
on
there.
his chest, so he can like use his feet to push off.
And you think of what those lion things like. If they're wearing the costume, you can
Yeah.
kind of see
Yeah.
how that would work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd look really cool.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, on this particular occasion, Tommy's partner missed the jump. So Tommy was still propelled forward, but because his partner's jump was missed,
Tommy couldn't make it as well.
Tommy wasn't propelled forward
Yeah.
with
Far
enough
enough.
force or
Yep.
height to land successfully on the platform that he needed to. So falling short of the intended platform, Tommy's neck collided with great force against the steel platform edge.
Ow.
Oh wow, that is not where I saw that going. But that,
No.
and in
Oh.
a forward, like he was facing it, so like in a forward
Forward.
motion.
Mm.
So once he hit the platform, he obviously fell to the ground immediately.
Yep.
And
Which
his-
we don't know is how high.
we don't
Yeah.
know how far, but
He either slumped because it was,
Yeah.
at the same, like, or below his standing height, or
I've
He
got
fell
to
a
assume
long
it was
distance.
higher than his standing height, because
well, I
otherwise
don't
he
think it
wouldn't
matters.
have...
Like if he's fallen in an awkward position,
Yeah, I suppose
like,
he
it
might
doesn't
have...
matter
Yeah,
how
okay.
high
Yeah.
it is. if
Oh,
he
I agree.
lands.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I'm just
true.
like, but we don't. It could be centimeters. It could be
Yeah, we don't know how
couple of
high the
meters,
fall was,
yeah.
but it's not indicated that the fall had any impact
impact on the outcome.
on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
outcome. It was very much the impact with the steel platform
And his neck.
and his neck. It's
Yeah.
not a good place to, if it was his arm or something.
And, sorry, was he wearing any proper costume at this point?
No.
Okay. Because I'm like, was his vision impaired that had any impact on how he landed if he
No,
couldn't
I think
see
it
that
was
kind of
just
stuff?
His partner
Yeah.
missed the jump. It was just, you're
Yeah.
propelled in a certain way.
And
There's
that's
not a whole
happening.
lot of control over your body.
And when you say the partner missed the jump, as in they didn't jump far enough, so they didn't reach the platform they were meant to reach?
It doesn't specify. It just
Or
says
did they
But
just
that-
the
go
partner.
to jump but then realise they weren't going to make it, so stopped? And that's
That's
how they
my
missed the
impression
jump?
is that, like, two people standing, he tries to get to this one, isn't going to make it, so lands here, and Tommy's meant to get to
Yeah.
that one,
Yeah.
and so also
That
doesn't
arc
make it, and then
doesn't-
arcs to much, much lower
Yeah.
when he's meant to be meeting that second platform.
yeah.
Yeah.
So much lower, i.e. majority of his body height.
Yeah. Just nowhere near enough height
Yeah.
in order to land on his feet. Like he
Yeah.
should. So I should also say that this entire incident was captured on CCTV footage,
Oh.
which was, of course, reviewed by the coroner, and apparently it's all very clear what happened. So it was never
Yeah, I
really
guess
in
that's good
doubt
evidence.
about what had happened, although he didn't
Yeah.
explain very well.
Because he was
That's
just
because-
like, yeah, you just watched the
Just
video.
watch the
Yeah.
CCTV footage.
He
and
clearly
you're
jumped,
sad.
didn't make it, and hit his neck. And you're like, no, I need more
Yeah.
information.
That's
Okay.
right. So obviously Tommy suffered significant trauma to his neck, which greatly impacted his ability to breathe. So after the jump, the others in the room immediately became aware of what had happened, and they made an attempt to commence CPR on
Okay.
him. From the footage, they all appeared very shocked and didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yes.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty full on.
Not everyone's going to have that first aid training.
No.
Yeah, and the immediate response. Even if you are
And
first aid
Train is
in
also
that
just
moment.
like so heightened,
Yeah.
right?
It's obviously not something they ever expected
Yeah.
to have happened. So an ambulance was called and Tommy was taken to the hospital in an unconscious state and placed on life support. The assessment of Tommy's injuries following his arrival at the hospital included an anterior rupture of the trachea at the level of T1, causing a massive air leak into the neck and chest, and a number of resulting complications that come from that.
Yeah.
And that's exactly why the coroner said that the individuals who were with him attempted CPR,
Yeah,
because they
right.
couldn't
They
actually
couldn't
do
actually get
it
any air in
because the
properly.
air was escaping
Yeah.
Right.
as they were trying to perform CPR.
Yeah, that
so
would've
just,
been
it was
very-
ineffective.
That would have been very confusing.
They didn't know what to do. Like,
First aid course didn't teach me how to deal with
well,
this
none of them were
complication.
first aid trained, but they tried.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Tried to do CPR and they were like, this isn't working.
Yeah.
What
And
was
if they've
going
called an
on?
ambulance, someone's probably talking them through it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there wasn't any sort of detail in the coroner's report again
As to what
about how
happened.
long it took the ambulance to write any of
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
I guess it's not really pertinent in this
True.
case. He was admitted to the ICU where it confirmed that he had a hypoxic ischemic brain injury that was not survivable.
Yeah. Were there any injuries to his blood vessels or anything else in his neck, or was it just the trachea?
I think it was just the trachea.
Yeah.
So this is kind of a bittersweet addition to the coroner's report, but he said that Tommy's friends and family gathered by his bedside and they commenced some Buddhist rituals and prayers and were kind of very together and close at the time that Tommy passed away. So he ended up passing away from his injuries on the afternoon of the 6th of November, which was about 2 days after he sustained the initial injuries.
Did it go into any detail, like did they do surgery on him at all, or was it just that they worked out
I
the brain
don't-
injury was
It doesn't go into
non-survivable?
specifics, but I don't think.
Yeah.
I think it was from the outset. So I know we don't generally focus too much in these podcasts on the procedural nature of coroner in particular, but this coroner made a couple of comments in his inquest that I thought were worth mentioning at least.
Sure.
So the coroner noted that as this accident was captured on CCTV, there was little doubt about the events that occurred, which I think is, as we touched on, is why he didn't go into a lot of detail. The inquest was convened to consider the circumstances around Tommy's death and to examine whether similar incidents could be avoided in the future, so that's all pretty standard. Tommy's death was the first known death in Australia in the lion dancing community. However, injuries themselves are not uncommon in lion dancing worldwide, but sort of there was no pattern of this kind of
Yeah, gotcha.
thing happening in Australia, at
Yeah.
least.
This was a once-off at that time.
Yeah. And this is the part that was interesting. So the coroner sort of said that a number of organisations were advised of the inquest and given the opportunity to participate and make submissions, which is something we hear regularly about different parties making submissions in inquests. So in this particular inquest, the court approached Safe Work, the City of Sydney, New South Wales Office of Sport, the Department of Premiering Cabinet and the Department of Fair Trading, but all of them declined to make submissions. The coroner doesn't mention why they all declined to make submissions. I just thought it was a very interesting comment to put in there.
Well, some of them you can throw like was WorkSafe, right?
Yeah, and that's
was
the
he
thing,
being
like,
paid employed to do line dancing?
no, it was a hobby.
Yeah. So I think WorkSafe could probably be like, well, this was not in the context of employment.
Yeah.
So therefore we have no right to be involved.
It's something that you have like a right to be involved. You can opt out. It's not directly relevant
to us.
It's not in our jurisdiction. And I think that's the same with all of the departments that were listed.
I can understand where some of the governmental departments might be hesitant to be involved outside of something that's directly relevant to them.
Yeah.
More than the standard sort of like, this is not our thing.
Yeah, which is completely, like, I completely agree with that. And yeah, as I said, I don't think sort of lion dancing fits squarely under any of those jurisdictions, and that's something that's explored a little bit more by the coroner, more so that there's no sort of government support or government supervision, I guess, of this kind of thing, because there's no associational body in relation to lion dancing, so there's just absolutely no regulation whatsoever.
Basically just people getting together to do something.
Is there any kind of international organisations?
Not that was mentioned.
Okay.
But I would assume there would, because there's international competitions.
And who's organising like competitions here in Australia? And
yeah,
that
that
kind
was
of
my
stuff?
other question. Because you were saying there was competitions in New South Wales.
Yes, because they were practicing for a routine.
Yeah.
So I'd assume it was either a competition or it was just a performance or something.
So throwback to the drag racing episode was that there was a national drag racing association or body, because they were the ones that were primarily organising the meets and competitions and all that kind of stuff. So I would have assumed that if there is some kind of competition or performances or whatever, there must be some kind of, even if it's loosely organisational body. But
there's not, and that's something the coroner looked for and was like, there's no body, authority, any sort of industry.
And maybe that's why the coroner was reaching out to all the rest of them, being
correct, because
like,
what else does anyone want to say anything about this?
Yeah. Or have some oversight in the future.
Yeah. And as I said, the Chinese Youth League, which was the organisation that kind of sponsored, supported, I guess, encouraged these different activities. And they actually were using, this was in the Chinese Youth League's rehearsal or like just like an activities room.
Yeah.
That they were doing this in. They fell under the jurisdiction of Department of Fair Trade in New South Wales, which was one of the bodies that the coroner approached.
Yeah, and they didn't want to make a
declined.
submission.
Interesting.
Interesting. But they don't specifically have any jurisdiction over Chinese lion dancing, just the organisation that members join the lion dancing subgroup through.
Interesting.
So the key issues of investigation during this inquest were whether any safety measures or systems could or should have been in place to reduce the risk of a fall like Tommy's, whether any safety equipment could have reduced the risk or prevented the injuries sustained by Tommy as a result of the fall. He also looked into whether there should have been more adequate supervision or training, whether there should be any formal regulation or oversight of lion dancing or similar activities, because as I said at the time of Tommy's accident, there was no formal association or regulatory body for lion dancing here in Australia. And finally, the coroner looked at whether associations whose members engage in physically strenuous, dangerous sporting recreational activities should be required to have members who hold first aid qualification and have first aid signage around where the first aid is stored. Because in this case, as I said, none of them had first aid training, and what I can infer or assume from the comments made in the inquest was that no one knew where the first aid stuff was. Not that, again, it's highly relevant in this case, because you can't just put a Band-Aid over a blown trachea.
It's also hard to know what kind of level, because you're saying any kind of sport that could result in dangerous activity or whatever. Again, it's hard.
So vague.
Yeah, it's hard to know how high the platforms were, what they were constructed out of, how they were going to... How high a risk was there that this or other injuries would occur.
I feel like
Similarly.
a sport where someone's sitting on someone else's head, there's risk of...
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Maybe we say it's akin to, say, like, the injuries that could be sustained in cheerleading, and therefore...
Yeah. Like gymnastics
Yeah,
or something like that.
okay, and therefore is of risk, and therefore a first aid should be necessary, versus I'm thinking of, like...
Chess.
Oh, no, I was thinking of other types of dancing with no other kind of acrobatic type movement.
Still sprain an ankle.
But the likelihood
You're
of
probably not going to die.
death
Unless you have a
or
heart attack
serious
or-
bodily
Injury.
harm.
Yeah.
It's
Although-
low.
Yeah.
Whereas
yeah,
compared
it's
to
really
like rugby.
Yeah.
High chance.
well, but other types of dancing, ballet or acrobatics or cheerleading or whatever, where like sure, some of those movements are much riskier than other types of or forms of dancing.
And that's right, and that's something that kept on coming into my head while I was reading through this inquest was, like, I kept on comparing it to gymnastics and, like, how there are certain elements in gymnastics that have just been completely banned
Oh, really?
from gymnastics because they're
Like,
so dangerous.
what
Like, particularly uneven bars. You know, some gymnasts would, like, stand on the pole and then do, like, backflips and
Yeah.
things, and there was a high chance of them, again, hitting their necks.
Yep.
Yeah.
On the pole, and I think there were a few incidences of people becoming paraplegics and passing away from gymnastics related injuries, and they actually completely just said you're not, like, the Gymnastics Association was like, nah,
Stop doing
it's
this.
actually illegal now for
Yeah.
you to perform those moves because they're too
Yeah.
dangerous.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and so if you do them, you're just disqualified.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Like,
Even if you could.
even if you
You
can,
had the
don't
ability,
even
yep.
attempt to do
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Like, it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Because we won't let you perform them in competition.
Yeah. So there's no point learning it.
Yeah.
There obviously were competitions around line dancing, and I don't know nearly enough. How often are they doing those kinds of jumps? Is that only for the special occasion?
Here's my assumptions. I would assume it's only for the competition elements because for, you know, the different festivals and things that they do it, that's more the original traditional art form, I
Yeah.
think, that they're doing.
Which one I
Whereas-
would assume would be mostly on the ground.
Yeah.
And so,
yeah,
again,
like,
is this-
it's all on the ground.
Is this
Yeah.
also just higher injury risk because it's something that they rarely do as well in terms
Yeah.
of that kind of stuff? So therefore they're less practiced at it. And therefore
Can't comment
increasing
on
that
that
risk.
because it sounds like they do train quite a lot for it.
Mm.
So I don't know how much of their training is attributed to the pole work versus...
Yeah,
And
the
do
other
we know
stuff.
whether he had ever entered in any competitions where he did this particular move? So he
No.
might have been learning it for the first time.
True, how experienced they are in this particular move.
No, all it says is that they don't allow inexperienced students to work on the poles and platforms. So
Yeah, okay.
by, again, inferring from that Tommy and his partner were at least quite skilled and experienced enough to
Yeah.
be allowed to.
Yeah.
And
Work
without
on the
supervision, because one would also assume if you're only just learning that step,
You would
that
you'd
there's going to be
hope.
a third party stepping you through it.
Yeah, you would hope. Yeah. Before we go through the different issues that I just
Yep.
outlined, step out the different changes that the Chinese Youth League made
Yeah.
prior to the inquest, but since Tommy's death.
Yep.
So first of all, they just stopped the use of poles altogether. So
Oh, wow,
no
okay.
longer, again, kind of
Sort
like
of
the
seems
gymnastics.
fair enough. Like,
Yeah. They placed a CPR wall chart and first aid kit in the practice area. As I
That
said,
seems very fair.
As I
yeah,
said, this-
even for when you're not line dancing,
well, that's right.
that's useful.
And again, my assumption is that this infers that there wasn't an easily accessible
Yeah,
First
one
aid
before.
kit.
Yeah.
in the area. Again,
There might have been one in like a kitchen cupboard.
yeah, potentially,
or
but no one knew where it
cupboard somewhere,
was.
yeah.
Not very helpful if no one knows where it is. They mandated all activity groups nominate members to undertake first aid training, so at least one of the members in the activity group knew first aid. They mandated the presence of at least 2 coaches at lion dancing training. Again, in Tommy's circumstance, there were 2 coaches there, but apparently sometimes there were only 1.
Yeah.
So they sort of said, let's make sure that 2 are present at all rehearsals. And the Chinese Youth League also mentioned that the organisation was in the process of examining its membership application forms, including permission forms for children. Didn't go into any explanation of what that meant and why they were doing that.
Yeah, because he was over 18.
He was
so there's
over
no-
18.
But again, presumably there were other people in the cohort that were under, or we don't know how
Mhm.
old the training buddy was that he was
Exactly.
on the
Yeah.
shoulders of.
Because
we
he'd
don't.
been doing this for 4 or 5 years, and he was 19, so he would have been
He would have
under
been a
18
child
when
when
he
he was doing
started.
it.
True, when did he actually start doing
Yeah.
that? And potentially the parents of Tommy were like, well, he's been doing this for years, should we not set this in place so no one has to deal with that while
Yeah.
it's still their child, but while
Yeah.
the child's under the age of 18.
That's right. And
It's
like,
just generally, let's make this whole sport safer, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
And any activity that they're doing.
In that youth league.
But again, there was just no explanation. It was just,
True.
they're looking at the forms, particularly the ones in relation to people under the age of 18.
Okay.
So going through the issues, the first one about whether safety equipment could have prevented or minimised injury in Tommy's circumstance. So the coroner explored some different safety equipment that he thought could be used in this case, especially in the use of poles, because although the Chinese Youth League no longer had poles, there were still some groups
Yep.
in New South Wales, and I'm assuming Australia-wide, they're just focused on New South Wales here, that still use poles. So the first one he explored was the use of chest, neck, or head guards, but members of the community indicated that the use of any such guards would inhibit a performer's movements, and in doing so would create a safety risk.
Yeah, I can imagine like
Yeah.
your foot stuck in the
Get your
chest
foot
of
stuck in
someone
the
else's chest
pad.
guard.
Yeah. Head first
Oh,
down.
yeah.
But also if you're trying to do a back flip or a front flip or whatever, and you need to
Yeah.
actually be able to tuck
Yep.
completely, then that's going to inhibit your ability to do that, which would actually make that unsafe as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So many
that's right.
issues.
So I can understand that. The coroner then turned his mind to where the padding around the landing disc could have prevented injury, but the safety expert in the inquest was of the view that this would create a tripping hazard. So if you think about like a padding
yeah.
around the
Yeah.
steel outside, but
And you go to jump off one of them that has the padding, and then you
you,
get
then you
foot
accidentally put your toe on the pad, you jump off the pad, and then you fall.
Again,
Yeah.
with not knowing what like the depth of that is, though, I'm
Mm.
like, well, if you just had a sheer thing, so that if you're colliding with it, it's not like a
Doesn't have an edge. as
yeah
much
a
of an
significant edge to it,
Mm,
like therefore coming like significantly down, so that he would have to be like impacting with like majority of his body rather than just his neck alone.
Yeah.
Would that have helped rather than the edge padding situation?
yeah,
But
well, they talked about like a padding around the pole would be okay, but I think he was more talking about like padding around the edge
yeah.
of the
Yeah,
actual
padding around the
platform.
pole is not going to have helped Tommy.
Not Tommy,
No.
but if someone
Yeah, in
else
general.
collided with the pole.
Yeah.
So, in fact, the safety expert's view was that the only way to significantly reduce the risk of lion dancing with poles, other than completely banning the activity altogether, would be to use a harness and pulley system to protect performers if they fell. So, again, I think of like, you see when you, like divers and things, when they're practicing their dives and they like get those
yeah.
like little harness pulley things.
Yeah.
To help them sort of.
They
flip
do
without
it,
falling
Just the
on their head.
movement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do it,
Um,
but then someone catches them.
Yeah,
if they need.
that's right. But the coroner noted that this is an extremely expensive
Yeah,
thing
that's
to
a
put in place, and or he also said that it would inhibit the flexibility of the dance.
yeah, which makes sense.
So the answer is ban the jumping on the poles in the first place, or the platform jumping.
Yeah.
Is effectively the
The
only way
only way
to prevent.
To prevent something like this happening.
But then it's really hard because again, with the like, but that's one single thing that's happened out of how
Mhm.
many.
Mm-hmm.
But we've come across a lot of those things, and a lot of those discussions we've had being like, yes, but
And
we
what-
really should be
yeah,
doing things that are safe.
Yeah.
what
so-
responsibility do people assume? Blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah. Which might go back to those permission forms,
True.
Mm.
to be fair.
Yeah, fair. Like you should be only letting people over the age of consenting age
Mhm.
assume that responsibility for themselves. So yeah.
That's right. So when looking at the supervision, the coroner noted that there was minimal supervision of Tommy and his partner on the night of the accident, as we said. There was also an inadequate warm-up, and it was clear that Tommy's partner was not confident or ready to proceed with the jumps. I completely skipped this a lot earlier. Apparently he had practiced the jumps beforehand and just was feeling a little bit shaky without Tommy on his head.
Oh,
He was
right.
feeling like he wasn't that confident, but
Yep, but then they
I think
decided to go
men
ahead
being
with-
men,
Well, I was gonna say Tommy would have been like, "Let's do it."
yeah, that's right. So they sort of still proceeded with it anyway. And
Yeah.
again, if there had been supervision, like more close supervision, and someone had been like, nah, he's not making the jumps very well, like maybe
Yeah.
you shouldn't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
maybe
Let's practice that a little, or maybe you're just having an off night. Like
Yeah.
everyone
yeah, let's
has
try
off
again
nights.
the next time we're
Yeah,
training.
exactly. But that's not what happened. They were kind of left up to their own devices there. And again,
Yeah,
don't know how old the
They're making
partner
their
was,
own
but Tommy was 19
judgment
years
call.
old. Would have just been like, let's do it.
Yeah.
So the coroner said that he could not determine whether or not greater supervision would have impacted the outcome in this case. I mean, I have my own opinions, but he did conclude that there should have been better supervision.
And I think it's hard. It depends on who your supervision is. Because if your coach or whoever is good mates with you and you both like there and you technically have warmed up, maybe someone would have pushed the partner. It could have come from both directions of encouraged them to continue practicing or encourage them to take a back step. Like I think depending on the type of coach that you are, it could go both ways.
It could
go I'm going to try to give you confidence to help you, or it's I'm not sure you're ready, I'm going to tell you to step back. I think the coroner probably is towing that line of it really could have gone both ways, so therefore you can't say that it definitely would have changed the outcome.
That's true, but from my view, like I'm just putting myself in that position. If I saw someone struggling with a jump on his own, knowing that the next step was for him to do the jump with a person on his head, I would probably be like, let's just keep on practicing sans person on your head, or let's just try another day.
It's hard to tell, was that objective or subjective evidence though? Like in hindsight, did the partner say, I was feeling pretty shaky, or is there like CCTV footage of him really struggling to do the...
Yeah.
So it is shown him struggling to do the jumps? Okay.
So Tommy's partner told the inquest that he did not know why he missed the jump on that occasion, a particular occasion. But it's clear from CCTV footage that he was having difficulty with making the jump even before he jumped with Tommy. So he was struggling.
It's objective. Yeah.
Yeah. We know that he was doing that, and he seems that he admitted that he was having trouble.
But at the same time, even if you were super confident you've done it a bunch of times,
there's still that risk.
You can still
always.
Yeah, you can still slip, you could still just misjudge it.
But I guess they're trying to look at what can we improve.
Yeah.
And so the answer is more supervision, more warm-ups, making sure people are ready to go.
Yeah.
So turning to first aid, the coroner accepted that the type and extent of Tommy's injuries meant that people with first aid qualifications wouldn't have been able to treat his injuries in any case because CPR was ineffective because of the type of injury. And he just sort of said that an endotracheal tube was required to treat this. And as I said, the Chinese Youth League had stated that it was trying to implement first aid training for at least one of its members or more of its members from each of its subgroups. But at the time of the inquest, which was in March 2016, so Tommy passed away in November 2014, so I don't know, 18 months later, none of the lion dancing coaches had received first aid training.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's disappointing.
Yeah, and that's exactly what the coroner said. He actually said, I'm really disappointed. You said that you were going to do this, and yet
well, not even if you said, I think the personal onus there, if you're in that, and you've heard that someone's recommended that someone in your troop should have first aid training, all go together and get some first aid training.
Yeah.
And, I guess they could be horrendously traumatized. So, look, okay, maybe I'll give them some grace there, but
and especially the two of them who were there at
the time. But I just think, wouldn't you want to do as much as you could to help others?
Yeah.
And if you think that first aid has been recommended in that state.
Unless that wasn't passed along to them.
Yeah, maybe.
By the league.
I'm sure it would have been.
Hopefully after this inquest came out, they did.
So while the coroner strongly encouraged the uptake of first aid training by all members, honestly, of the Chinese Youth League, he was of the view that it was not appropriate to recommend a blanket mandatory requirement for all organisations involved in this type of activity.
Okay, interesting.
Right, so basically saying their jurisdiction doesn't quite go that far.
Or maybe, if they're not doing any of the platform stuff.
Yeah, there's less.
Technically, I can't enforce you to need someone to have a first aid.
And he didn't enforce
or recommend.
He just encouraged.
Yeah.
It wasn't a recommendation, it was just encouraged that.
Yeah.
Similarly, he encouraged all organisations involved in physical activity, whatever that means, to have adequate first aid signage. It's again the signage issue. But again, he didn't deem a blanket mandatory requirement for a number of reasons, including the difficulty of policing such a requirement amongst such a broad-ranging category of activities. So I'm just imagining police going along being like, don't have your first aid signage up.
Here's a soccer field. Where's your first aid signage?
I'm just thinking of what's the definition of a physical activity as well. Of do the hardcore knitters need to have the first aid certificate?
No, I think he was meaning we're going back to that strenuous activity.
Yeah.
You
go for a run in the bush.
Yeah, it's
where's
the
hard. First aid? It's
hard to carry a first aid certificate on you.
Exactly, but interesting. As I mentioned, there's no official or unofficial body that governs or supports lion dancing in Australia, The coroner explained that industry bodies can have a positive influence in promoting safety standards.
Yeah.
So he noted that the lack of a peak body means there's no mechanism for the government to provide support, including in regards to safety, and that further community development would be necessary to build such a body in the lion dancing community, which of course would be beneficial for everyone involved. The coroner didn't actually hand down any formal recommendations in this inquest. He said because there is not the obvious body with whom to engage in relation to lion dancing or similar activities, and because the Chinese Youth League itself had stopped using the pulse. So basically he said, no point of handing down formal recommendations because there's no one I can engage with.
Yeah, right.
In relation to
I actually
genuinely
I don't think I've read another case where it's like, I've got no one to engage with, so what's the point?
You know, in the Chinese Youth League, they've already moved to the poll, so it's not an issue anymore.
Yeah, and they're engaging and have, well, not uptaking the particular recommendation that he kind of encouraged for them, but like it sounds like they are actively making steps, so recommendations there aren't necessarily helpful, but for the rest of the broader lion dancing community. Yeah, he's like,
he's
okay,
like, I don't know who to engage with.
Yeah, don't know what to do here.
Yeah.
Wow.
That said, he did make some informal recommendations.
They're my favourite. Sometimes they can be real sassy.
I know. So one of them was that a copy of the coroner's findings be sent to the New South Wales Police, where an officer, they named a particular officer, he has a good rapport within the Chinese Australian community. And they asked that particular officer go out into the community with the findings of the inquest and disseminate them, particularly to the lion dancing community, through group visits and information placed in the Chinese and other language press. Specifically, the coroner asked that the police officer make all lion dancing groups aware of the inherent danger of lion dancing with poles and the need for community groups to improve their first aid capabilities and signage.
I assume that this officer is like some sort of community liaison person.
Yeah, he's probably a member of the community.
Okay.
To be honest. And
so I was like, they've not just
police officer.
Was he involved in the inquest? Because I'm just picturing the coroner being like, this specific person,
he was
I
involved in
do
the
this.
inquest.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But it just says a person who has got a strong rapport with this community. So that was, again, my assumption that he's probably a member of the community himself.
Surely his role must be with regards to the community.
You would really hope so.
Rather than just like, we're going to make it your problem now.
He's a police officer from something completely different.
Yeah. But can you add this to your workload?
I think he does policing work.
With relation to?
Relation to the community.
Yeah.
So I thought that was quite a kind of clever way to do it. It's sort of like community outreach.
Yeah.
I've been like, hey, there's no formal body that I can liaise with, but like
it does sound like a lot of legwork for that one police officer that's been handed versus when you've got an organisation, it makes it
spread that workload.
Yeah. But I really do appreciate mentioning like distributing or disseminating in appropriate language, I think, because if you disseminate that to that community and it's not being read because it's not in the form that they need it to be in, then that's pointless.
Yeah. It's a creative way, I think, to try and come up with a solution to an issue that he couldn't address formally.
Yeah.
Let's just say.
Fair.
I can't deal with this formally because there's no one to make the formal recommendation to.
Yeah.
But this guy has been heavily involved in this inquest and it sounds like he's got a really great rapport within the community. Here's an idea. And again, it's an informal recommendation, so it doesn't have to be done. But I think it's a creative way to do it. And it was the coroner's hope that by making the lion dancing community aware of these issues, that it would then encourage the community to create a formal association, which would provide a central point for information and advice. So kind of hoping that somehow this police officer is going to kind of bring them together.
Potentially as well, though, like disseminating the information might mean, because you said that some of them had stopped using the...
Well, the Chinese Youth League has stopped using the polls.
But maybe others hadn't because they hadn't heard of this or been involved in this inquest or the events of this. And so hence, maybe with that dissemination of information would lead to more of that. Now that's been formally summarised and looked into versus, grapevine communication of, do you hear that guy that, didn't make the jump and subsequently died of his injuries? That may not necessarily prompt someone to stop that activity, but now with the inquest being like, here are the reasons why we shouldn't encourage it, maybe that would lead to more of that as well.
That's right. The coroner also expressed his confidence in the measures already taken by the Chinese Youth League, and in combination with the outreach work, by the New South Wales Police, he thought that should be sufficient enough to reduce the likelihood of further tragedies like this occurring.
Nice.
Hopefully in the future.
Hopefully.
So yes, that is the case of Tommy No. And yeah, the Chinese lion dancing.
That's very interesting.
I have learned so much about something that I didn't even know existed right now.
Which, and again, as I said, it was such a clickbait coroner's report, if there ever was one, because I was like, oh, what is that?
Yeah.
Like, it was just that intrigue, and my head automatically went to, when it said lion dancing, I thought, like, a circus or something with live animals.
like an actual
Yeah.
And I was
lion.
like, oh, that doesn't exist anymore, does it? In Australia, at least.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think it does. So, what actually is this?
Yeah.
But yeah, interesting, and like, as I said, the coroner had an interesting approach at the end, which I appreciated. as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I am glad that he persisted. I think there very much could have been a risk that the coroner just went, I've got no one to give this information to.
The end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But instead persisted with, well, in the absence of that, here's some options.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Better than none.
Exactly. Well, thanks everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we'll see you again sometime soon. Bye.